Good evening and welcome to my How Healthy Are You educational conference call. My name is Dr. Thomas Brewer. I'm a PhD chemist, and I'm going to begin the call with a little bit of basic virus information and how a virus attacks us and why it's such a problem. And so this is just general information about viruses, but I will link it to the coronavirus COVID-19. Now, as you know, if you've been on these calls, there are many types of coronaviruses. Even the norovirus, which is normally found on cruise ships up until this one, is a type of coronavirus. A lot of flu viruses are in the coronavirus category. And so I want to start with, in general, about viruses and this virus, this COVID-19. So COVID-19 was actually an animal virus that somehow, some way was able to make the transfer to a human. And that still doesn't mean it could go from human to human, but that was the next step. It actually did and still does transfer from human to human. So the way a virus gets into our system, and the reason some people survive well and some people actually die from this or any virus, the standard influenza has still more deaths in the United States in every previous year than this current COVID-19. Now, that doesn't mean if we didn't go through these draconian measures to self-isolate and social distance, that it may be much, much worse. Time will only tell when all the data is analyzed. But viruses have a propensity to kill people, especially people with weakened immune systems. And here's how that works. So a virus is not a living entity, which I've mentioned in the past, but it can act like a living entity once it lands on a particular cell in our bodies. So this COVID-19 virus, it likes our lung tissue and various mucous membranes. That's where it can land. A virus cannot replicate, and all living species have to be able to replicate. Well, a virus needs something to replicate, and what it needs is our cells. So it will then replicate utilizing the DNA of the cell it lands in. And now the virus is replicating, or essentially multiplying, but it doesn't do it on its own. It needs a host cell, and that's why technically a virus isn't considered alive. It does not take in nutrients and eliminate waste, and it does not propagate on its own. But once it attaches to another cell, a living cell, then the whole entity acts as a living organism, and the virus is in control. The reason this COVID-19 is so dangerous is because we don't have anyone out there that's immune to COVID-19, meaning we don't have anyone with antibodies already in their system because no one has seen this before. It is a new virus. So if you have a strong immune system, that doesn't mean you won't, say, get the virus. I use the word get in quotation marks. Absolutely, you would. But with a strong immune system, it wouldn't kill you, and you may not even notice your symptoms. It could be that minimal, and that's what's been happening to people. So technically, they're still sick. Technically, they can pass the virus on to someone else who doesn't have such a great immune system. Technically, they don't even know they're sick, but that's because their immune system is strong. So people falsely think because their immune system is strong, well, they won't get this COVID-19. Well, you still get it. It still latches onto your cells in your lungs or in your mucous membranes, but you may not even know it's there because your immune system will recognize it very quickly as an invader, and then your immune system, this would be your white blood cells, would attack it, destroy it. Notice you can't kill something that isn't living, but you can destroy it, and then now you have antibodies. So next time a virus like this, or actually exactly like it, comes across your body, well, then it won't even be able to latch on to your tissue because you've developed antibodies. So we have this concept called herd immunity. And think of our population as the herd. So when enough people are exposed to any virus, and obviously the ones that don't die develop antibodies against it, when you have about 60% of the population developing antibodies due to exposure, just that, again, they didn't die, they were able to fight it off, their immune system, they recognized the problem before they died, then you're considered no real need to vaccinate, even though the powers that be would like people to vaccinate. You end up with what they're calling the flattened yield curve, where people don't get sick, and it's not a pandemic. The best way to ensure that you can fight off any virus, any pathogen, any invader to your body is to already have a low viral load in your body, meaning you don't want a lot of viruses in your body that your white cells are already fighting off when you get exposed to COVID-19, if you were to get exposed. So I talked and wrote a lot about the Epstein-Barr virus a few months ago, and if you remember, just about everyone has this virus in their system. That would be an example of somebody with a high viral load, and they wouldn't even know it. If you were already fighting off a cold or influenza, standard flu, that would be an example of having a high viral load. So that weakens your system, and it makes you more prone and vulnerable to attack by COVID-19 or any other virus. So if you want, I recommend you go back and reread the newsletters where I talked about Epstein-Barr virus, which we all have. Pretty much all of us have it. It's just a matter of how bad, and reacquaint yourself with what you need to do to minimize that virus or get rid of it. And if there's questions on that, I can answer those now. So that's all I had for this conference call. I'm going to unmute everyone and open up the call for questions. So do we have any questions for this evening's educational call?
I have a question about going off or getting over food allergies.
Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned a few weeks ago that you just discovered you're allergic to, I think it was dairy was one of them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I
And
learned that a few months ago, but yeah.
do you expect that you'll be able to get off of that by taking your enzymes?
Actually, I've been taking enzymes for the past 17 years. So it's not a matter of taking enzymes to get over the allergy. What I have to do and what anyone else has to do is avoid the food for about 6 months and then slowly reintroduce it. And that way my body won't have such a huge reaction to it. Okay. So I think your question is, how do you get over food allergies?
Correct.
And the answer is you avoid them for at least 6 months and then reintroduce them slowly. Now, there's a reason for both of those rules. The 6-month rule allows a lot of the antibodies in our system, the same type of antibodies that would fight off a virus. Well, these are the antibodies that think the food is something bad, something like a pathogen, which it isn't. I know the food isn't a pathogen. It isn't a virus. It isn't a bacteria. But our body, or my body, whatever you're allergic to, thinks it's an invader. So it develops antibodies against food, even though you don't want it. And they tend to form when you eat a lot of a certain food. So one thing most people notice that take my food allergy test is the foods they eat a lot of, those are the ones that they're most allergic to. And if it, I mean, rarely is it everything you eat, but it'll be 1 or 2, possibly 3 foods that you eat a lot of. They could be your allergens. I've had people take the test and they're only allergic to one thing. And of course they eat many, many things. They're only allergic to one thing. So that's easy. And some people take the test and they're allergic to maybe 10 different things. Well, that's harder to work around because those are the 10 foods they eat a lot of, so they have to change their diet. But it isn't forever. It's for 6 months to get the antibodies to calm down. So that's the first rule. The second rule is to reintroduce the food slowly. If you reintroduce the food quickly, you're going to develop antibodies very fast again, and you're back where you started. But if you introduce the food slowly and take your enzymes at the same time, then you give your body the chance to not develop antibodies against that particular food. Because essentially what your body did is it did something you didn't want it to do. It developed antibodies to a food that you like. So it takes about 6 months to work around it.
Right. And are there certain enzymes that are best for different foods, or not necessarily? You don't necessarily operate like that.
Well, there are, but every different type of enzyme is in the blends I sell. So it covers everything: proteins, carbohydrates, fats, fiber, sugars, which are simple carbohydrates. Dairy is included with a lactase enzyme. So everything's covered.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, but food allergies are a big part of our lives, and most of the time we don't even know it, unless we take a test. It's not an expensive test, but it's something I think everyone should do every few years, perhaps every 2, 3, 4 years, to do a food allergy test.
Right. How much does that test cost on average?
I believe it's $2.95, and that includes all shipping and deliveries and results, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another piece of information that would explain indigestion, runny nose, sore throat, persistent coughs, the coughs that just don't go away, but they're not due to a virus, body aches, headaches. So if you've exhausted a lot of your reasoning for the cause of these symptoms, it's most likely a food allergy. And then the question is, well, what food? So the test pinpoints the allergy. It's very obvious once you get the results.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So once we open up the country again, I'll be able to start analyzing people's blood and do the food allergy testing. But for the past month, I haven't been doing any blood screening.
Are you still planning to do one in Pennsylvania?
I am. I'm assuming that we start opening up in May, and but I would have to reacquire my airline ticket, but I still have my hotel reservation.
Okay.
So I'm just going to have to see what happens in the beginning of May.
Mm-hmm.
And if necessary, I'll just move it up a month to June.
Okay, yep.
So, yeah. So maybe I'll just have to delay it a month. But I'm assuming at some point we go off this lockdown. So I just can't see us being locked down forever. So at some point it's going to get lifted. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question, Doctor.
Yes.
I'm fairly new to your protocol, and I'm taking the Steromax and the plant enzymes, and I'm feeling much better. Wondering if you had any other suggestions to boost the immunity at this time?
Yes. So the trifecta for building your immune system would be enzymes, so you take the load off of digestion off your immune system, the Steromax to strengthen the white blood cell part of your immune system, and the third part, which was in last week's newsletter, is probiotics.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
okay?
Yes, it is.
Because probiotics are a big part of your immune system. Now, it turns out that both the probiotics and the white cells, there's a lot of them in your gut. So that's why you hear this term gut, which means gastrointestinal system. I've never liked calling it a gut, but that's what people do. They call it gut.
Okay.
So you want the white cells in your gastrointestinal system strong and active, but you also want the probiotic bacteria there to be active and for there to be enough of them to fight off parasitic bacteria. So that's your third part. Usually with probiotics, I don't recommend them until I've seen someone's blood, because if I look at someone's blood and I don't see parasites or yeast or fungus in their blood, then they hardly need a probiotic. And if they wanted to, it would just be at the most 1 capsule a day. And if they skip a day, it wouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I call a maintenance dose. It's either 1 a day or 1 every other day. Very low maintenance dose. But if I see a lot of parasitic bacteria or fungus or yeast in someone's blood, well, then the dosage is higher, somewhere between 3 and 6 a day, and then it's gradually reduced to 1 a day.
Okay.
So if you're just guessing, I would just start with the maintenance dose until I can look at your blood, and that would be 1 a day. That would be a conservative way to strengthen the probiotic portion of your immune system, and it would be very economical.
Okay, and would that be with the 3 plant enzymes a day and 3 to 6 Steromax a day?
Right. So the enzymes tends to be per meal. So usually I start people 1 per meal, and it goes up to 2 per meal if necessary, and it goes up to 3 per meal if necessary. A lot of that depends on age. The older we are, we tend to need more enzymes per meal. The younger we are, younger would be 20s and 30s, then we tend to need only perhaps 1 enzyme a meal. Again, I base this on looking at someone's blood, but without looking at someone's blood and they have digestive discomfort, I'd start at 1 enzyme a meal. And I would go up to 2 a meal, and if that improved any digestive discomfort, and if all the discomfort went away with 1 a meal, I would just stay at 1 a meal. I wouldn't go up to 2 a meal.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the Steromax, it depends on your white cells, but I often start people at 3 a day, and because of the virus situation we're in, I just stay at 3 a day. Don't even drop down right now.
Okay.
I think 2020 is going to be a year that everyone that takes Steromax never drops down to what I call a maintenance dose of 1 per day of the Steromax. I'm recommending everyone stay at 3 Steromax a day maintenance. But some people need to start higher on the Steromax, especially those with very weak immune systems or people recovering from cancer or perhaps recovering from Epstein-Barr virus or some other virus. I would start at 6 Steromax a day for about 45 days, then drop down to 3 per day. And Steromax is taken on an empty stomach about 30 minutes before your first meal of the day. Those taking 6 Steromax a day would take 3 in the AM and 3 in the PM. But again, always about 30 minutes before a meal on an empty stomach.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Dr. Brewer, could you talk about yeast?
About yeast?
In the body, yeast, and what effect it has on the body, side effects, and how to get rid of it?
Yeah. So yeast is a common problem in our bodies. It's kind of similar to the Epstein-Barr virus. It's just so prevalent. It is a very difficult type of bacteria to kill. Some people consider it a type of fungus, but it's very difficult to kill. And the best way to get rid of it is to starve it and to use your probiotic bacteria to kill it. But you have to do both. You can't just take probiotics and not starve the yeast. So the way you starve yeast is you take away its food supply, which are simple carbohydrates. So simple means sugar. So it means all sugars. Some of these sugars are good for us, such as the sugars from fruit. But if you're trying to get rid of yeast, you change the rules. And the rule of fruit being good, you kind of change it and say, well, if I'm trying to kill yeast, then fruit is not good right now. And once the yeast is gone, and that usually takes a month or two, then you can go back to eating fruit. Fruit is a very, very nutritious food, full of vitamins and minerals, antioxidants and enzymes, but it is also a simple sugar called fructose. Vegetables would be your best way to get nutrition when you're fighting yeast. If you're not fighting yeast, you can eat fruits and vegetables. So fruit is not good if you're fighting yeast. The other thing that isn't good if you're fighting yeast are carbohydrates like rice, which converts to glucose very quickly, and then the yeast feeds on the glucose. So, again, these are considered your starchy carbohydrates, and you would minimize or eliminate those for at least a month before you can reintroduce them. And while you're doing that, you take lots of probiotics. Now, for those that want to shorten the process down to maybe 2 weeks, you would take colloidal silver for those 2 weeks. You take a ½ ounce of colloidal silver 2 times per day on an empty stomach, so that equals 1 ounce per day of colloidal silver. You're just breaking it up into 2 doses or dosages of 1/2 ounce each. And do that for about 2 weeks. You don't take any probiotics during those 2 weeks. And once you stop the colloidal silver, 2 weeks worth, well, then you start on the probiotics. And that gets rid of the yeast much faster because you're actually killing it right away. I mean, that colloidal silver will go throughout your body and destroy the yeast. So, but either way, at the end, you have to take probiotics. And either way, you've got to reduce or eliminate the consumption of simple carbohydrates, which would be sugars and starchy carbohydrates. So those be considered foods that convert to simple carbohydrates very fast. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit on the yeast topic too, but if you have a toenail that looks like it has fungus on it, does that all mean that you have fungus in your blood?
No, it doesn't. Now, you can have fungus in your blood if you have a fungal infection under a nail, but it's not guaranteed. Usually it's just isolated. And the way I recommend getting rid of it, back to the colloidal silver, what you do is you soak a gauze pad and you wrap it around your nail and tape it so that the colloidal silver stays there. Now, I've seen all sorts of different ways. You could use a very small plastic bag. You could use plastic wrap. But you don't want that colloidal silver to evaporate right away. You want it to stay in contact with your nail for hours. So I've seen all sorts of clever ways to do that.
Okay.
And that should get rid of it in 1 or 2 evenings, should get rid of it.
Okay.
Right, because you're going right at the source with the colloidal silver. So colloidal silver, like any antibiotic, anti-mold, antifungal, anti-yeast, if you can go right to the source, it's far more effective than swallowing it and letting it find wherever the problem is throughout your body. So you have essentially a concentrated source of fungus, so you just go after the fungus where it is residing.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
White potatoes, when they're exposed to light, sometimes get green, and I was raised to believe that that's harmful to consume. Is that true?
I missed the beginning. What did you say at the very beginning?
White potatoes, when they're exposed to light, sometimes turn greenish.
Oh.
Is that harmful to eat?
I don't think so, unless it's mold. Yeah. Is it on the inside or the outside?
The outside, mostly. No, it's not mold.
It isn't mold.
No, it's just due to light exposure. It can happen right in the garden to growing potatoes or in storage.
I am not absolutely sure, but I don't think it's a problem, especially if you cook the potato, which most everybody does.
Right.
So even if it was bacteria, it would die when you cooked. But sometimes, doesn't it cover a lot of the potato?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I'm thinking back, I think I've seen that before, and it hasn't bothered me one bit. So I don't know for sure if that is, chemically what that is.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. If we don't have any other questions, I'm going to close out this evening's call. And I appreciate all the questions. And then a lot of people get to listen to this again during the re-recording where I kind of use it as a podcast in the newsletter. So thanks, everyone, for participating, and I'll be doing another call next week. Stay healthy. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you so much.